Emily's kitchen was her refuge, a space where the rhythmic chop of a knife or the soft hiss of a simmering pot could quiet her restless mind. Tonight, though, the air felt thick, almost suffocating, as she unwrapped a package from her late grandmother, Rose. Inside was a cast-iron Dutch oven, its surface blackened and scarred, heavy with age. Rose had been a culinary titan in their small town, her recipes passed down like heirlooms. Emily ran her fingers over the pot's rough edge, and a sharp, electric sting raced up her arm. She flinched, her pulse quickening. Tucked inside the pot, beneath a frayed cloth, was a note in Rose's shaky handwriting. For Emily, my kitchen dreamer. Beware, this pot has claimed many lives. Use it at your own risk. Claimed many lives? Emily scoffed, her voice thin in the quiet room. Rose had loved her theatrics, cryptic sayings, elaborate tales, but this felt different, heavier. The words clung to her as she placed the pot on the counter, its bulk settling with an almost audible thud. She traced its rim again, half expecting it to move. It didn't, but its stillness felt deliberate, like it was holding its breath. Shrugging off the unease, Emily decided to put it to use. A dinner party for her closest friends, Sarah, Mark, and Lisa, would be a fitting tribute to Rose. She'd make a beef stew, rich and hearty, just like her grandmother's. As she chopped onions, her knife slipped, slicing her finger. A bead of blood dripped onto the pot's edge and disappeared, swallowed by the iron. Emily blinked, a shiver tracing her spine. She dismissed it as a trick of the light and kept working. The kitchen soon filled with the warm aroma of simmering meat and herbs, but a faint, sour tang, like rotting earth, lurked beneath it. Emily frowned, sniffing the air. The spices were fresh, the meat unspoiled, yet the smell persisted, sharp and wrong. She stirred the pot, watching the broth bubble, and for a fleeting second, a face seemed to form in the steam, sunken eyes, a gaping mouth, before vanishing. She shook her head, blaming fatigue. Her friends arrived as the stew finished, their chatter cutting through the tension. Sarah, all warmth and laughter, wrapped Emily in a hug. Mark, with his easy grin, exaggerated a sniff and proclaimed it smelled divine. Lisa, reserved and observant, lingered by the stove, studying the pot. "This is stunning," she murmured, brushing its surface. "It's got a story." "It was Rose's," Emily said, managing a smile. "She left it to me." They gathered at the table, steam rising from their bowls. The conversation flowed, work woes, weekend plans, but Emily noticed a shift. Sarah's laugh faded, her spoon hesitating midair. "It's interesting," she said, her tone strained. Mark nodded too fast. "Yeah, bold flavors." Lisa set her spoon down, her brow creased. "There's something off, metallic, bitter. Did you tweak the recipe?" Emily tasted it and stiffened. They were right. Beneath the familiar notes of thyme and garlic was a harsh, ashy bite, like licking rust. Her face flushed. "I don't know what went wrong," she mumbled, scrambling to pivot. She'd baked an apple cobbler in the pot earlier, a backup plan, and served it quickly. Its sweetness smoothed over the awkwardness, and soon her friends were joking again, the stew forgotten. Alone later, Emily scrubbed the pot, the water clouding with grease. Lifting the lid, she froze. A brittle, yellowed paper was wedged in the rim. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. "Beware the pot's hunger. It feeds on fear." Her stomach twisted. Rose's quirks were one thing, little rhymes, odd warnings, but this felt sinister. Was it a joke? A relic of her grandmother's imagination? The kitchen grew too still, the pot a dark sentinel on the counter. Emily folded the note, shoving it into a drawer, and told herself it was nothing. She finished cleaning, flicked off the lights, and went to bed, though the pot's faint gleam lingered in her mind. Sleep came fitfully. When it took hold, it dragged her into a nightmare. The pot sat on the stove, its lid clattering as if something inside fought to escape. She approached, drawn by an unseen force, and lifted it. Shadows erupted, coiling, alive, wrapping around her. Voices rasped in her ears. "You're nothing. You'll never rival her. You're weak." She woke gasping, the clock reading 3:04 a.m., her skin clammy. The silence pulsed, thick and oppressive. Daylight didn't dispel the dread. Sipping coffee, Emily avoided the pot's corner of the kitchen. It was just a dream, she insisted, sparked by the note and a rough night. But her gaze kept sliding back to it, its presence tugging at her like a dare. Finally, she grabbed her laptop, typing "cursed cookware" into the search bar. It was absurd, but she needed answers. She sifted through ghost stories and folklore, finding nothing concrete, until a brief article stopped her cold. Local chef found dead in kitchen, no suspects. Dated to the 1800s, it described a chef stabbed with his own knife, surrounded by his beloved cast iron pots. Emily's throat tightened. She dug deeper, uncovering a chilling thread. Every few decades, a gifted cook met a bizarre end, their kitchens wrecked, their bodies branded with odd burns. Always, a cast iron Dutch oven appeared in the accounts, handed down or sold, slipping into the next disaster. Her hands shook as she shut the laptop. This was madness. Inanimate objects didn't murder people. But the note, the dream, the stew's taste, they gnawed at her. She glanced at the pot, and for a moment, it seemed to hum, a low, greedy vibration. She blinked and it stopped. That night, she hauled the pot to the basement and locked the door, hoping distance would quiet her nerves. Sleep still wouldn't come. She lay awake, the air heavy with unease. Around midnight, a sharp clatter rang from below. She froze, straining to hear. Silence stretched, then broke, a slow, grating scrape, like metal dragging across concrete. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She crept to the basement door, finding it ajar despite the lock. Descending the creaking stairs, she flicked on the light. The pot sat dead center, its lid tilted, not where she'd left it. She hadn't touched it. A whisper slithered through the air. "Feed me." Emily stumbled back, slamming the door and bolting upstairs. She barricaded herself in her room, but the whispers chased her, seeping through the walls. "You can't run. You're mine now." Emily hadn't slept. The whispers from the basement clung to her like cobwebs, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw the pot, its blackened surface pulsing with a faint, unnatural glow. By morning, her resolve hardened into something sharper. She needed answers. The local library was her first stop. Its archives held the town's history, yellowed newspapers stacked in dusty corners. She searched for hours, combing through obituaries and crime reports, her fingers smudged with ink. Then she found it, a faded article from 1892. Renowned chef found dead in kitchen, no suspects. The details were sparse, but one line chilled her. His prized cast iron pot was missing from the scene. Her breath caught. She dug deeper, uncovering a pattern. Every few decades, a gifted cook met a violent end. Stabbed, burned, or simply vanished. Always, a cast iron Dutch oven was mentioned, passed down or sold, slipping into the next tragedy. The most recent? Rose, her grandmother, who died in her sleep, or so they'd said. But Emily remembered the coroner's furrowed brow, the way he'd hesitated before signing the death certificate. She slammed the book shut, her heart pounding. This wasn't coincidence. The pot was cursed, and now it was hers. Back home, the air felt thick, oppressive. Emily hesitated at the basement door, the memory of last night's whispers clawing at her courage. She had to face it. Gripping a flashlight, she descended the creaking stairs. The pot sat where she'd left it, but the lid was askew, as if nudged by unseen hands. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and lifted it. A faint hum vibrated through the metal, and the temperature plummeted. Her breath fogged in the dim light. Then, a shadow moved, a flicker in the corner of her eye. She spun, but the basement was empty. Her pulse raced. "Who's there?" she called, her voice swallowed by the silence. A low chuckle echoed, sourceless and cold. "You can't hide from me, Emily." She stumbled back, the flashlight slipping from her grip and clattering to the floor. The beam rolled, casting wild shadows on the walls. One shadow lingered, darker than the rest, its form vaguely human. It drifted closer, and the air grew heavy with the scent of charred meat. Emily bolted upstairs, slamming the door behind her. She needed help, someone who understood the impossible. Her fingers flew over her phone, searching for local paranormal experts. One name stood out: Alex Crane, a historian with a sideline in the occult. His website was sparse, but the testimonials were glowing. She dialed his number, her voice shaking as she explained. "I'll be there tonight," Alex said, his tone calm but urgent. "Don't touch the pot again." Hours later, Alex arrived, his presence a strange comfort. He was younger than she'd expected, with sharp eyes and a leather satchel slung over his shoulder. He circled the pot, now back on the kitchen counter, his brow furrowed. "This isn't just a haunted object," he murmured, tracing its edge. "It's a vessel. Something's trapped inside." "Trapped?" Emily echoed, dread pooling in her stomach. He nodded, pulling a worn journal from his bag. "I've seen this before. Certain items, mirrors, dolls, even cookware, can bind entities. This pot, it's old, forged with intent. Probably by a cult or a sorcerer." Emily's mouth went dry. "What kind of entity?" "Hard to say," Alex admitted. "But it's hungry. It feeds on fear, maybe even life force. Your grandmother, did she ever mention anything strange about it?" Emily shook her head. "She was quirky, but nothing like this. She just cooked with it." Alex's gaze sharpened. "And she died suddenly, right? In her sleep?" Emily nodded, the implication sinking in. "You think the pot?" "Possibly," he cut in. "We need to know what we're dealing with. I'll set up a camera, see if we can capture its activity." That night, they rigged a motion-activated camera in the kitchen, its lens trained on the pot. Emily tried to sleep, but the house felt alive, creaks and groans she'd never noticed before. Around 2 a.m., a sharp clatter jolted her awake. She crept to the kitchen, Alex close behind. The pot's lid lay on the floor, spinning slowly. The camera's red light blinked, recording. Emily's skin prickled as she picked up the lid, its surface ice cold. "It's never done that before," she whispered. Alex's face was grim. "Let's check the footage." They huddled over his laptop, the video playing in grainy black and white. At first, nothing, just the pot, still and silent. Then, at 1:47 a.m., the lid rattled, lifting slightly. A shadow seeped from beneath it, coiling like smoke. It stretched, forming a vague silhouette. A man in a tattered chef's coat, his eyes hollow sockets. He turned toward the camera, his mouth splitting into a grin, and whispered, "Feed me your fear, Emily." The screen cut to static. Emily's blood ran cold. That's impossible." Alex's jaw tightened. "It's not just a spirit. It's something darker. A demon, maybe, using the pot as a gateway." "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We need to banish it," he said, his tone steely. "But first, we have to understand its origin. There's a place, an old restaurant downtown. It was owned by a chef in the 1800s, the one from the article you found. He was rumored to practice dark rituals in his kitchen." Emily's stomach churned. "You think that's where it started?" Alex nodded. "If we can find his records, maybe we can learn how to stop it." They drove through the night, the abandoned restaurant looming like a tomb. Its windows were boarded, the door padlocked, but Alex produced a crowbar from his trunk. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. They navigated the debris-strewn floor, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. In the kitchen, rusted utensils hung from hooks, and a massive stove dominated the space. Emily's beam landed on a shelf, where a leather-bound book lay, its cover embossed with a sigil, a twisted fork and knife. Alex snatched it, flipping through the pages. "It's his recipe book," he breathed. "But look, these aren't just recipes." Emily peered over his shoulder. The pages were filled with incantations, symbols scrawled in the margins. One entry stood out: the eternal stew, immortality through sacrifice. The ingredients were mundane: beef, wine, herbs, but the final step was chilling: seal with the essence of a willing soul. A floorboard creaked behind them. They spun, but the kitchen was empty. Then, a whisper slithered through the air. "You're too late." The temperature plunged, and the shadows deepened, coalescing into a towering figure. It wore the chef's coat, its face a mask of decay, eyes burning like coals. "The pot is mine," it snarled, its voice a chorus of screams. "And so are you," Emily screamed as the entity lunged, its clawed hand swiping at her. Alex shoved her aside, chanting a protective incantation. The demon recoiled, hissing, and vanished into the darkness. They fled, the book clutched tight, the restaurant's walls seeming to close in behind them. Back in the car, Emily's hands shook uncontrollably. "What now?" she gasped. Alex's face was pale but determined. "We know its name now. Victor Moreau, the chef. And we have his grimoire. We can use it to bind the demon back into the pot and destroy it." "But it's getting stronger," Emily protested. "It almost—" "I know," he cut in. "But we have no choice. If we don't stop it, it'll claim you, just like it claimed the others." As they sped toward Emily's house, the sky darkened, storm clouds gathering unnaturally fast. Lightning flashed, illuminating the pot on her kitchen counter, its surface gleaming, almost eager. Emily's heart sank. The battle was just beginning, and the demon was already one step ahead. Emily sat hunched over the coffee table in her living room, her eyes stinging from exhaustion. Stacks of books, yellowed newspaper clippings, and scribbled notes formed a chaotic fortress around her. Each page she turned was another dead end in her desperate search for answers about the cursed cast iron Dutch oven that had turned her life into a nightmare. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, its hands mocking her sleepless determination. She couldn't rest, not when the pot had already claimed her grandmother and now seemed intent on claiming her too. A sudden chill swept through the room, rustling the papers and sending a shiver down Emily's spine. She pulled her sweater tighter, her gaze darting toward the kitchen. There, on the counter, sat the pot, its dark, weathered surface catching the faint glow of the moonlight streaming through the window. She had locked it in the basement earlier that day, securing the door with a padlock. Yet here it was again, defying her efforts to contain it, as if it were alive and taunting her. With a weary sigh, Emily reached for another book, an old, leather-bound tome on local folklore she'd found buried in her grandmother's attic. As she flipped through its brittle pages, a loose sheet of paper slipped out and drifted to the floor. She bent to pick it up, her breath catching as she recognized her grandmother's elegant handwriting. "Emily, if you're reading this, it means the pot has chosen you," the note began. "I'm sorry, my dear, but I couldn't destroy it. The entity within is ancient and powerful, bound to the pot by a dark ritual. It feeds on fear and despair, growing stronger with each life it claims. But there is a way to banish it. You must." The note ended abruptly, the bottom edge torn away, leaving the rest of the message a mystery. Emily's heart pounded as she rifled through the book, searching for the missing piece, but it was gone. Frustration clawed at her chest, mingling with a rising tide of fear. What was the way to banish it? Why hadn't her grandmother finished the warning? A sharp, rhythmic tapping broke the silence, jolting Emily from her thoughts. It came from the kitchen, a soft, deliberate sound, like fingernails drumming against metal. Her blood turned to ice. She knew that noise. It was the pot calling to her again. Her legs felt leaden as she stood and crept toward the kitchen, each step echoing in the oppressive quiet of the house. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, reverberating in her skull. As she crossed the threshold, she saw the pot trembling on the counter, its lid rattling against the rim as if something inside were struggling to break free. "Stop it," Emily whispered, her voice shaking. "Leave me alone." The tapping didn't stop. Instead, it quickened, a frenzied beat that set her nerves on edge. Then, with a deafening clang, the lid launched itself off the pot and crashed to the floor. A blast of frigid air erupted from within, snuffing out the overhead light and plunging the room into darkness. Fumbling with trembling hands, Emily pulled her phone from her pocket and switched on the flashlight. The narrow beam sliced through the gloom, illuminating tendrils of shadow spilling from the pot's mouth. They writhed like living serpents, curling toward her with predatory intent. She stumbled backward, her breath hitching as the shadows snaked around her ankles, tugging her closer to the pot. "No, please," she cried, kicking at the tendrils. They tightened their grip, cold and unyielding. In a surge of panic, she grabbed a rolling pin from the counter and swung it wildly. The wood passed through the shadows, but they flinched as if stung, retreating just enough for her to break free. The kitchen fell silent, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. Emily clutched the rolling pin to her chest, her pulse thundering in her ears. Then, a voice slithered from the pot, deep, guttural, and dripping with malice. "You cannot escape me, Emily," it said. "Your fear only makes me stronger." Before she could respond, the shadows surged again, coalescing into a towering figure. It was a man, gaunt and skeletal, clad in a tattered chef's apron stained with dark, rust-colored smears. His hollow eyes glowed with a sickly light, and when he smiled, rows of jagged, yellowed teeth glinted in the flashlight's beam. Emily recognized him from an old newspaper clipping she'd found, a chef named Victor Grayson, the first documented victim of the pot's curse, found dead decades ago under mysterious circumstances. But this was no ghost. This was something far worse. "Welcome to my kitchen," he rasped, his voice a grotesque parody of warmth. "I've been waiting for you. What do you want?" Emily demanded, forcing her voice to steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. "Your soul," he replied, his grin widening. "Just like I took your grandmother's and all the others before her. But you, Emily, you're special. Your passion for cooking, your desire to create, it's delicious." He stepped closer, the stench of decay rolling off him in waves. Emily raised the rolling pin, but he laughed, a grating, bone-chilling sound that echoed through the room. "That won't save you," he sneered. "Nothing can." But Emily refused to surrender. Her grandmother's note flashed through her mind. There is a way to banish it. She didn't know how, but she wouldn't let this thing win. With a surge of defiance, she lunged past the entity and seized the pot, intending to hurl it against the wall. The moment her hands touched the metal, a white-hot pain seared through her palms, and she screamed, dropping it to the floor with a resounding crash. The entity chuckled, its form dissolving back into shadows that flowed into the pot like ink. The lid snapped into place on its own, and the kitchen fell silent once more, save for Emily's ragged breathing. She sank to her knees, cradling her burned hands. The entity was gone, for now, but she knew it would return. She needed help, someone who understood the forces she was up against. Then, a name surfaced in her memory, Professor Hawthorne. He was a retired historian she'd met at a town fair years ago, a quirky man with a reputation for studying local legends and curses. If anyone could help her, it was him. Ignoring the pain in her hands, Emily grabbed her coat and car keys. She had to find Hawthorne before the entity struck again. As she stepped outside, a cold wind whipped around her, carrying the faint, mocking sound of laughter. The thing in the pot was watching, biding its time. She hurried to her car, her heart hammering against her ribs. The drive to Hawthorne's house on the edge of town was a blur, her mind racing with questions. Could he decipher her grandmother's note? Did he know how to banish the entity? She didn't even know if he'd believe her, but she had no other options. When she reached the old Victorian house, its windows dark and curtained, she hesitated. The place looked abandoned, but a faint light flickered behind the front door. She took a deep breath and knocked, the sound sharp in the stillness of the night. Moments later, the door creaked open, revealing a wiry man with wild gray hair and piercing eyes. Professor Hawthorne peered at her over wire-rimmed glasses, his expression a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Emily," he said, his voice gravelly, "what brings you here at this hour?" "I need your help," she blurted, holding up the note. "It's about the pot, my grandmother's pot. There's something inside it, something evil." Hawthorne's eyes narrowed, and for a fleeting moment, a shadow passed over his face, something knowing, something dark. He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. "Come in," he said. "I think I know what you're dealing with." As Emily crossed the threshold, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just walked into something far more dangerous than she'd left behind. Unbeknownst to her, etched into the bottom of the pot, hidden beneath layers of soot, was a final message from her grandmother. "Beware the one who knows its secrets, for he is bound to it too." Emily followed Professor Hawthorne into his dimly lit study, the air thick with the scent of old books and candle wax. Shelves lined the walls, crammed with dusty tomes and strange artifacts, amulets, bones, and jars filled with unidentifiable substances. A large wooden table dominated the center of the room, its surface cluttered with papers, candles, and a weathered grimoire. Hawthorne motioned for her to sit, his piercing eyes studying her with unsettling intensity. "You say there's something evil inside the pot," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "Tell me everything." Emily recounted the events of the past few days, the cryptic note from her grandmother, the pot's inexplicable movements, the shadowy figure of Victor Grayson, and the entity's chilling words. As she spoke, Hawthorne's expression grew darker, his fingers drumming rhythmically on the table. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his hands. "What you're dealing with is no ordinary spirit," he said. "It's a demon, bound to the pot through a dark ritual. It feeds on fear and despair, growing stronger with each soul it claims." Emily's stomach churned. "My grandmother's notes said there's a way to banish it. Do you know how?" Hawthorne's gaze flickered to the grimoire. "Yes, but it's dangerous. The ritual requires a blood sacrifice and precise timing. If we fail, the demon will be unleashed, free to wreak havoc." A shiver ran down Emily's spine. "What kind of sacrifice?" "A small offering, your blood, willingly given. It will weaken the demon's hold on the pot, allowing us to seal it away for good." Emily hesitated, the memory of the entity's cold grip still fresh in her mind. But she had no choice. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Hawthorne nodded, rising from his chair. "We must act quickly. The demon is already growing stronger. We'll perform the ritual at midnight, when the veil between worlds is thinnest." The hours that followed were a blur of preparation. Hawthorne gathered ingredients, salt, sage, and a vial of holy water, while Emily helped draw a protective circle on the floor with chalk. As the clock neared midnight, they stood before the pot, which Hawthorne had placed in the center of the circle. The air hummed with tension, the candles flickering as if in warning. Hawthorne handed Emily a silver dagger, its blade etched with strange symbols. "When I give the signal, you must cut your palm and let 3 drops of blood fall into the pot," he instructed. "Then, we'll chant the incantation together." Emily gripped the dagger, her heart pounding. The room seemed to darken, the shadows lengthening as midnight approached. At the stroke of 12, Hawthorne began to chant, his voice resonating with power. "By the light of the moon and the blood of the willing, we bind thee, demon, to this vessel no more." The pot trembled, its surface glowing faintly. Emily's hand shook as she raised the dagger, pressing the blade to her palm. With a sharp intake of breath, she sliced her skin, wincing as blood welled up. She held her hand over the pot, letting 3 crimson drops fall into its depths. The moment the blood touched the pot, a deafening roar filled the room. The floor shook, and the candles guttered, plunging the study into near darkness. Emily stumbled back, clutching her bleeding hand, as the pot began to spin wildly within the circle. "Keep chanting." Hawthorne shouted over the din, "Don't stop." Together, they recited the incantation, their voices straining against the cacophony. The pot's glow intensified, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Then, with a blinding flash, the pot cracked, a jagged fissure running down its side. A plume of black smoke erupted from the crack, coalescing into the form of the demon, Victor Grayson, his eyes blazing with fury. "You dare to challenge me?" he snarled, his voice a thunderous growl. "I will devour your souls." The demon lunged at Emily, but Hawthorne stepped between them, brandishing a crucifix. "Back, foul creature," he commanded. "You have no power here." The demon hissed, recoiling from the holy symbol. Seizing the moment, Emily grabbed the grimoire and flipped to the final page of the incantation. By the blood of the innocent and the will of the pure, we banish thee to the abyss, she cried, her voice ringing with newfound strength. The demon screeched, its form wavering as the words took effect. The pot shuddered violently, the crack widening until, with a final, ear-splitting crack, it shattered into pieces. The demon's scream echoed through the room as it was sucked back into the fragments, its form disintegrating into nothingness. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. Emily sank to her knees, her body trembling with exhaustion and relief. The pot lay in ruins, its dark power seemingly extinguished. Hawthorne approached her, his face pale but triumphant. "It's done," he said, helping her to her feet. "The demon is gone." Emily managed a weak smile, but as she looked at the shattered pot, a nagging doubt crept into her mind. It had been too easy, too straightforward. She glanced at Hawthorne, who was already gathering the pot's fragments into a cloth bag. "What will you do with them?" she asked. "I'll dispose of them properly," he replied, his tone curt. "You should go home and rest. You've been through enough." Emily nodded, too drained to argue. As she left Hawthorne's house, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon, casting a pale glow on the quiet streets. She drove home in a daze, her mind replaying the night's events. When she finally collapsed into bed, sleep claimed her almost instantly. But her dreams were far from peaceful. In them, she saw Hawthorne standing over the pot's fragments, his eyes gleaming with a strange, hungry light. He whispered words she couldn't understand, and the pieces began to glow, reassembling themselves into a new, sinister form. Emily awoke with a start, her heart racing. It was just a dream, she told herself, but the unease lingered. She reached for her phone, intending to call Hawthorne and check on the pot's remains, but stopped short. A news alert flashed on her screen. Local historian found dead in apparent suicide. Her blood ran cold. She clicked the article, her hands shaking. Professor Hawthorne had been found in his study, hanged from the rafters. There was no note, no explanation, only a cryptic symbol carved into the floor beneath him, matching the one on the pot's lid. Emily's breath hitched as she realized the truth. The demon hadn't been banished, it had merely changed hosts. Hawthorne's willingness to help, his knowledge of the ritual, it all made sense now. He had been bound to the demon all along, using Emily to free it from the pot and into a new vessel, himself. Panic surged through her as she heard a faint tapping from the kitchen. She stumbled out of bed and down the hall, her worst fears confirmed. There, on the counter, sat a new cast iron Dutch oven, identical to the one she destroyed, its surface gleaming with malevolent intent. A note lay beside it, written in Hawthorne's hand. "The cycle continues. You cannot escape." As the tapping grew louder, Emily realized with dawning horror that the nightmare was far from over. The demon was still here, and now it had a new master, one who knew her every move. Emily stared at the new cast iron Dutch oven on her counter, its polished surface gleaming like a predator's eye. The note from Professor Hawthorne, "The cycle continues. You cannot escape," lay crumpled beside it, the words seared into her mind. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone, dialing the only person who might believe her, her best friend, Sarah. "Sarah, it's Emily," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I need you. Now." Within minutes, Sarah arrived, her face pale with concern. Emily led her to the kitchen, pointing at the pot. "It's back," she said, her voice cracking. "Hawthorne, he's dead, but the demon, it's still here." Sarah's eyes widened as Emily recounted the ritual's failure and Hawthorne's betrayal. "We have to destroy it," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "For good this time." Emily nodded, but doubt gnawed at her. The demon had outsmarted them before. What made this time different? Still, she couldn't give up, not with her life and soul on the line. They scoured Hawthorne's grimoire, which Emily had taken from his study before leaving. Its pages were filled with arcane rituals and warnings, but one passage stood out. To unbind the demon, the vessel must be shattered by one who has faced its true form and lived. Emily's heart sank. She had seen the demon, Victor Grayson's twisted visage, but had she truly faced it? The memory of its hollow eyes and jagged smile sent a shiver down her spine. "I think I qualify," she said grimly. The ritual required a sacred fire, fueled by herbs and blessed wood, to consume the pot's fragments. But first, they needed to weaken the demon's hold. That meant confronting it head-on. With Sarah's help, Emily gathered the necessary materials: sage, salt, and a vial of holy water she'd found in her grandmother's attic. They arranged the pot in the center of the kitchen, surrounding it with a ring of salt. Emily lit the sage, its smoke curling through the air like ghostly fingers. "Ready?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Emily nodded, clutching the grimoire. Together, they began the incantation, their voices blending in a desperate plea. "By the light of truth and the fire of courage, we call thee forth, demon. Face us and be judged." The air grew heavy, the temperature plummeting. The pot began to rattle, its lid clattering as if something inside were clawing to escape. Then, with a violent shudder, the lid flew off, and a column of black smoke erupted from the pot, coalescing into the demon's form. But this time, it wasn't Victor Grayson. The entity towered over them, its body a writhing mass of shadows, its eyes burning like coals. When it spoke, its voice was a chorus of screams. "You dare summon me again? Foolish mortals." Emily's knees buckled, but she forced herself to stand tall. "We're not afraid of you," she lied, her voice wavering. The demon laughed, a sound like bones grinding together. "Lies. I can taste your fear." Sarah stepped forward, brandishing the vial of holy water. "Leave her alone," she shouted, flinging the liquid at the demon. It sizzled on contact, and the entity recoiled, hissing in pain. Seizing a moment, Emily grabbed a hammer from the counter and swung it at the pot. The metal rang like a funeral bell, but the pot remained intact. The demon's laughter echoed through the room. "You cannot destroy me so easily." Desperation clawed at Emily's chest. She needed to weaken it further. Remembering the grimoire's words, she realized what she had to do. She had to face its true form, its deepest secret. "Tell me your name," she demanded, her voice steadying. "Your real name, not the one you stole from Victor Grayson." The demon's eyes narrowed, its form flickering. "You think knowing my name will save you?" "Yes," Emily said, recalling a passage from the grimoire. "Names have power. Reveal yours, and I'll spare you." The entity hesitated, then sneered. "Very well. I am Abaddon, the Devourer." The name sent a jolt through Emily, but she didn't falter. "Abaddon," she repeated, her voice ringing with authority. "By the power of your true name, I bind you." The demon roared, its form convulsing as invisible chains seemed to wrap around it. Emily seized the hammer again and brought it down on the pot with all her strength. This time, the metal cracked, a spiderweb of fractures spreading across its surface. "No!" Abaddon shrieked, its shadowy form beginning to unravel. "You'll pay for this." With a final, desperate swing, Emily shattered the pot into pieces. The demon's scream pierced the air, a sound of pure agony, as its essence was torn apart. The shadows dissipated, leaving only silence in their wake. Emily collapsed to the floor, her body drained. Sarah rushed to her side, helping her up. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice trembling. Emily nodded, though uncertainty lingered. The pot was destroyed, the demon vanished, but at what cost? Days later, Emily stood in her grandmother's attic, sorting through old boxes. The horror of the past week felt like a distant nightmare, but the scars on her hands and heart remained. As she sifted through a trunk of her grandmother's belongings, she found a small, leather-bound journal. Its pages were filled with recipes, but tucked between them was a letter addressed to her. "My dearest Emily," it began, "if you're reading this, you've faced the darkness and survived. I'm so proud of you. The pot's curse is broken, but remember, evil never truly dies. It merely changes form. Stay vigilant and trust in your strength. You are more than enough." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she folded the letter and tucked it into her pocket. Her grandmother had known, had always known, and had prepared her for this battle. Months passed and life slowly returned to normal. Emily's cooking, once a source of joy, now carried a bittersweet edge. She opened a small cafe in town, naming it Rose's Kitchen, in honor of her grandmother. The locals loved it, and for the first time in a long while, Emily felt at peace. But one evening, as she was closing up, a package arrived. It was small, wrapped in brown paper, with no return address. Curiosity piqued. She tore it open, revealing a tiny cast iron pot, ornamental, barely big enough to hold a cup of soup. A note accompanied it. "A gift for your new venture. May it bring you prosperity." Emily's blood ran cold. The sigil etched into the pot's base was unmistakable, the same one from the cursed Dutch oven. She dropped it, her hands shaking, and it clattered to the floor unbroken. From the shadows of the cafe, a faint whisper curled around her. "Did you miss me?" Emily's scream echoed through the empty room as the lights flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. The end, or is it?